that keys are to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from offseason to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback Podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm going to talk about which San Francisco 49ers starters are going to be back in 2025. But it's not just that. There's also the 49ers continuing to go through picking up a special teams coordinator, a defensive coordinator, and we're continuing to get names that come out of guys that Kyle Shanahan has interviewing for those positions. So we're progressing through the process of the offseason. And of course, if you're a regular on the channel, you know that that's what I've been doing, from talking about exit interviews and where you go after that to knowing that you decide on coaches next and you turn your attention to players. But now you're in a unique position where you're focused on Kyle Shanahan, still focusing on filling out his coaching staff with these interviews, but he's also having to have conversations with John Lynch about certain players, which players financially the 49ers can afford to be obligated to, which ones they can't, as they try to figure out what Brock Purdy's contract and other contracts are going to look like and how they balance what they have to pay players with what they need on this football team, which players are going to be able to keep and which players they're going to have to move on from. And if you have to move on from them, then how do you replace them? That's when you start talking to pro scouting and you start figuring out which free agents make sense for your football team. You talk to the collegiate scouting and you find out which players are going to be available that fit your scheme that are around college football. Now, for Kyle Shanahan, most of his focus is going to continue to stay on retaining the players that are inside the building first. So he's handling coaching, he's handling all the interviews. That's great. And then he's got to figure out which guys he can retain, which ones on the roster they have under contract they're going to be able to hold on to, because there could be some salary cap casualties. We've already seen it with a couple of guys. And so the 49ers got to continue to move forward with their plan. So that's what we're going to do in this one. We're going to move forward with the 49ers plan. We're going to talk about which starters from the San Francisco 49ers are going to come back. And then in another video, we'll get more into the depth of the San Francisco 49ers football team, because you have to fill your holes first. And that'll also open the door to a conversation about which free agents they could potentially go for. And once you get through free agency, that will make a clear and concise path for the 49ers draft picks. And we're going to talk about draft picks all throughout the offseason. Of course, draft is one of the funnest things to do, but I think it's important to go through the process the way that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch go through the process, so that way we can get a really clear picture on every step. So before I talk about these special teams coaches that have come in for interviews, and I want to get to the players as well, but I want to touch on that. I want to say, please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. And if you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. The largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, to NHL and UFC. Bet Online is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, Bet Online has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. So I want to talk about the coaches a little bit, because we know that the 49ers have interviewed Robert Saleh and Dre Townsend. Those have been the two defensive coordinators we heard about. And then, of course, Brandon Staley was going to be an internal candidate. I'm sure Kyle Shanahan has interviewed him in the process as well. And then when it comes to special teams, the 49ers really, it hadn't been a lot of movement. The conversation in the exit interview about Nick Sorensen was he will be potentially up for the job if he decides he wants to come back to the 49ers coaching staff. No, he will be the special teams coordinator, but at least in consideration. Well, then they completed an interview yesterday with the assistant special teams coordinator for the Detroit Lions, Jet Modkins, as for the special teams role. He's been there since 2021. So experience as an assistant and maybe looking to make a move and a pretty good special teams unit there in Detroit. An opportunity for Kyle Shanahan to get an idea of some new blood, some new ideas on what people are doing outside the league. Well, then it came out today that the San Francisco 49ers also interviewed Broncos assistant Chris Banjo for the special teams role. So Chris Banjo, another name that has been linked to the 49ers special teams, and he's had 2 years into his coaching career. This is from Mike Garafolo. He's 2 years into his coaching career after a 10-year stint as a DB and special teamer. Banjo is getting looks to advance. So Banjo, the name probably sounds familiar. That's what it was. He had played in the league as a defensive back for 10 years and now is getting into the coaching ranks and getting an opportunity. Kyle Shanahan has been interviewing. Look at the defensive coordinator position, former players as well. I think it's a good idea. So Banjo and Jet Modkins look to be the guys right now that Kyle Shanahan is looking at for special teams. And I think we have to consider that Nick Sorensen is still involved. They can hire a coach at any time at this point. So something is going to happen. And we know that with Robert Saleh, they're waiting to see how the head coaching positions look. Jacksonville and the Raiders seem like they were interested. Will that ultimately land him a job? I think if it doesn't, he will probably be back in San Francisco as the 49ers defensive coordinator. So that's interesting. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, and me and Jay Hill talked about this over on the Ant Hill Show on Patreon. If you're not a part of Patreon, go check that out. We had a conversation about the special teams coordinators, and I brought up that one of my favorites in the entire league is John Fossil. And with all the things that happened in Dallas with Mike McCarthy, John Fossil could now be available. And if he is, the San Francisco 49ers and Kyle Shanahan should interview him and ultimately pounce. I think he's a big-time stud at the special teams coordinator role. So that could be something interesting in a development as well. So special teams still being decided by Kyle Shanahan. Looks like 3 names right now involved in the mix with Jet Modkins, with Chris Banjo, and with Nick Sorensen. Those are the 3 names so far linked to special teams for the 49ers. When it comes to defensive coordinator, it's still Robert Saleh, it's still Trey Townsend, and that is pretty much it as of right now. Hopefully we'll hear a little bit more as time goes, but seems like the 49ers are really wanting a reunion with Robert Saleh. But let's go ahead and let's switch gears. Let's get into which starters will be back for the 49ers in 2025. And it's not just going to be my word for it, but I'm also going to take in some of the audio as well from Kyle Shanahan and with John Lynch talking about some of these guys. And I want to start with Brock Purdy because Brock Purdy's contract, Brock talked about the fact he wants to get it done early on. He'd like to get it done earlier the better, so that way he can be a part of all the phases of the offseason and continue to help this football team grow. And so making a decision on Brock is going to be important. Do you let him play his 4th year out, potentially franchise him in the future? Do you sign him to a new contract? Well, I think the 49ers would like to sign him to a new contract for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you sign him to a new contract, then you can kind of find out who exactly Brock Purdy's contract is going to be for each season. And that will kind of help you figure out what you want when it comes to the certain guys, the certain people that are going to be involved as far as, can we bring Dre Greenlaw back? Can we bring Talanoa Hufanga back? Because his money will then be mapped out for the duration of his contract. So I think that's what they want to find out. But I think with Kyle and with all the coaches, the first thing you have to decide is, does this player fit what we want? Is this the player I want to move forward with? And I think that's always interesting. So let's listen to what Kyle had to say about his feelings on Brock Purdy. And I think it's a pretty strong opinion that should give us a direction of what they think about Brock Purdy and whether the 49ers are even thinking about potentially replacing Brock as the quarterback of the 49ers.
Need to get back. Like, I expect everyone to be ready to go and, excited to really get this going and play some football. And that starts with Brock. Like, Brock is the leader of our team. I've loved these 3 years with Brock. I plan on being with Brock here the whole time I'm here. So, Brock's been a stud. He's a guy I got a lot of confidence in, and just as a human. But it starts with what he's done in the field these last 2.5 years, and we're capable of winning a Super Bowl with him. We just almost did, and I know he's capable of getting the Niners Super Bowl in the future.
So strong comments. I say strong because whenever you say I want to be here as long as he's here. I want us to be a pair for the duration of the time period that I'm in San Francisco. I think it's strong. And he talked about his character as a person, but he talked about who he was as a player. And Kyle Shanahan had to have the conclusion that Brock Purdy could win a Super Bowl. They went to a Super Bowl together. They did not win, but Kyle Shanahan said, hey, he already proven that he can win a Super Bowl. He took it to the Super Bowl, and we think he can win a Super Bowl. I think that is the nod of the cap. That is the, hey, we want to bring Brock Purdy back to San Francisco because we know what he can do for our football team. So I think that was very important that Kyle Shanahan sign off on it, because that's the first nod. It has to meet what's going to happen on the field. Then you start worrying about the finances. Sometimes finances ultimately will price people out, but it sounds like every intention of Kyle Shanahan is to have Brock Purdy back. And I think this is what most people think. But when you get out into 49ers land over on Twitter, you start hearing some interesting concepts. And, just today, the mock draft came out and they had the 49ers taking Jackson Dart in the second round as the eventual replacement of Brock Purdy. So this always gets the ball rolling on certain conversation points. I'm not going to engage in that because I think listening to what Kyle Shanahan had to say and then listening to what John Lynch has to say about the contract will give us a clear picture on Brock Purdy coming back in 2025. And then I'll give my final solution if I think he's going to be back or not. And I think you probably have an idea of where I'm going.
Well, listen, I think what we know about Brock is that he's our guy. We've got, we have interest in Brock being around here for a long, long time. He's done so much for our organization. He's won big games had a little tougher task, as we all did this year, with some of the things that happened throughout the course of the year. We just never could string games where we were all together. And through that, he continued to lead. He continued to play at a high level. So we have every interest in him being around.
Every interest in him being around. He's won big games. He's someone that we want here. It's clear. Brock Purdy's going to be a San Francisco 49er in 2025 and beyond. What that contract looks like, I don't know. But it seems like both sides are motivated as well to get this thing done as early as possible. And, my friend Mark Adams, who we do the Red and Bold show together, he's talked repeatedly that he believes Brock Purdy and the 49ers will get a contract done earlier rather than later, and that he thinks that both sides are motivated to do so, and I couldn't agree more. I think both sides are. And now you never know how contract talks are going to work out. We don't know what Brock Purdy's going to ask for or what the 49ers are going to put forward as far as an offer. So it could get dicey, and I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but at least you've got a situation where it feels like both sides are optimistic they can get something done. And we do know that this is going to map out and pave the way for the rest of the contracts with free agency and how money looks. So getting Brock Purdy done early is the best situation for the 49ers, and that will map out a clear path. Just like getting a defensive coordinator will map out a path for what kind of player personnel changes you want to make and which players you want to be in because of the scheme and the type of evaluation that coach is going to have for those players. You want the same thing when it comes to Brock, so you can map out how much can we spend for a guy like Drake Greenlaw or Talanoa Hufanga, or maybe bringing in somebody from the outside to play defensive tackle in place of Javon Hargrave if Hargrave's not here. Those are all things that have to be discussed. Now let's talk Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey should be back in 2025 healthy and ready to go. It was a tumultuous season, to say the least, for Christian McCaffrey, but I felt like he handled himself pretty well. And it looks like he's at least out of the woods a little bit when it comes to his Achilles tendonitis. He will have to adjust his offseason workouts. But I think if they go through and come up with a good plan, he can come into next season very healthy with a plan to keep him healthy throughout the season. And we will see Christian McCaffrey back in San Francisco. New contract last year. Not really a fan of losing players like Christian McCaffrey. He'll be back. Now, Kyle Juszczyk, I think, is probably a fringe guy. Because of the rework contract next year, the 49ers have been looking for ways to find ways to cut salary. And Juszczyk was one of the guys last year. Eric Armstead decided it was too much, and he moved on. Kyle Juszczyk decided he wanted to be a part of the 49ers in 2024. And though it really did hurt him, he talked about this pretty openly, was that it kind of hurt his pride, and he was very upset about it, that they came to him and asked him to take less money. But ultimately, he did it and put the team, in front of himself. And I thought that was a very great move for him to do as far as just for the team. But financially, that hurts. And pride-wise, that hurts as a person because Kyle Juszczyk knows what he deserves. So I do believe the 49ers intend to keep Kyle Juszczyk on this football team in 2025. I think this could be the swan song year for him in San Francisco. I don't think there's a guarantee beyond 2025, but I do think I'm leaning more towards Kyle Juszczyk to be back. But this is one that I'm not 100% sure on. But I think that Kyle Shanahan's talked enough about Juszczyk throughout the season that he knows what he brings to the table, and they don't really have an option. You look at the tight end room, and besides George Kittle, it's picked over. There's not really anyone that could fit that role of Kyle Juszczyk, which makes him invaluable right now, and I think likely to stay on the roster in 2025. George Kittle is an absolute yes. In fact, George Kittle's one that I think the 49ers might sign to a new extension. He's going to be going into the last year of his deal, so they might want to rework that deal. Kick some of the money down the road a little bit, but secure him. He's an all-pro player who's playing at all-pro level, and so his play is not falling off. He continues to be really good, and you don't want to lose good players who motivate your football team. So I think George Kittle for sure will be back. Now let's talk about Trent Williams, because Trent Williams had injuries this season, and it definitely, he struggled a little bit with what happened on the football field. But, the questions with his age and the way that things have happened have definitely had people asking, is Trent Williams going to be back? I thought with the contract that he signed last year, it was more likely that Trent Williams was going to be back. But the 49ers brass did speak on this. So let's listen to what John Lynch had to say about Trent Williams and whether he'll be back in 2025.
Trent's doing well. He's, he had a bruise in the ankle joint, and it probably took a little longer than anyone anticipated. But sometimes that happens, and the good news is it's taken a positive turn. Trent's mindset is where it always is, and he's still very interested in being a great player that he is, and I think he's still got a lot left in the tank. So Trent's committed as ever, and we love having Trent Williams a part of us.
Still committed as ever. 49ers definitely want him there. That's why they ponied up and gave him the extra coin during the offseason. So Trent Williams is going to be a part of the 49ers in 2025. I can't see Trent Williams wanting to go out on the shelf. I think that he wants to go out there and prove that he's still the best left tackle in football. And I think some people may have forgot this year. Tristan Wirfs gets, the honor, and he deserved it. He played really well. But I think Trent would like to go out and say, hey, if I'm not injured, I'm still the best. And so I think Trent Williams is going to want to go out and prove that. And I don't think he wants to go out on a stretcher on the doctor's table. He wants to be able to walk out Super Bowl champion. So I think that's something that the 49ers are going to be working forward to having, is Trent Williams back at left tackle and ready to help the football team. So I think that's really exciting for the 49ers. Now, his counterpart, left guard Aaron Banks, I don't think that Aaron Banks is going to be returning. This is the first starter we've got on offense where I feel like the 49ers are planning on going in a different direction. Banks had a season marred by injury. He was in and out of the lineup, and you just really seen a lack of quickness. He just wasn't healthy. He didn't play up to the level that he played in early 2023. And I thought that you seen more consistent play from some of the backups. I thought Ben Barch did a really good job when he filled in. I thought Nick Zakelj played pretty admirably as well. Even Spencer Burford had a good opportunity. And I think the 49ers look at a situation there where they can't afford to pay an Aaron Banks. They're going to have to go another direction. And they have some young guys, Barch, Zakelj, Burford, that can compete for that role. They could still potentially look at somebody in free agency, a more low-budget potential option. Maybe John Feliciano's knee isn't as bad, even though I kind of expect John Feliciano to retire and not come back in 2024. I think that's where we're looking at it. Now, when you look at Aaron Banks and being gone, I think that Barch right now seems to be a real option, and we'll see. And the 49ers have to move on at left guard, and he just wasn't good enough this season to kind of trigger them to make a move and bring him back. So I do believe Banks will be on another football team in 2025. Jake Brendel, and I think a lot of people want Jake Brendel to be gone, but he's going to be under contract for the San Francisco 49ers in 2025. And I think that he's going to be back. And I think the best situation for the 49ers is for Jake Brendel to be in an open competition for the center position. Give Nick Zakelj a real shot at this. Let him go out and compete. I know a lot of people really like Nugent and Hennessy. Those are other options that could compete. There's also the opportunity for the 49ers to go out and see a guy like Josh Myers is going to be a free agent. He's been running basically the same system in Green Bay. Maybe you take a look at Myers, or you take a look at another player in the draft and see if maybe they will be a guy. Now, something that might also click into gear is I know Dominic Puni was a phenomenal guard, but this is a guy that everyone saw 5-tool potential. And so Dominic Puni, now that he's played a season and he understands this offense, could be an option at center as well. So I expect Jake Brendel to come back, but I'm not saying he's going to be the starter in 2025. I think he's going to have to earn that with competition with several players, including probably Dominic Puni, which could be interesting. Now, Colton McKivitz and Dominic Puni are on the right side, and I expect Dominic Puni to be back, of course. Phenomenal starter. He will be there. Great rookie season, and he solidified that right side. Colton McKivitz, I thought it was a vast improvement from what we got in 2023, and the fact that he only gave up 1 sack, and I know he gave up hurries and he gave up hits, and yes, he did all those things, and he's still a flawed player compared to some of the greats. But I think when you look at what right tackles look like in the NFL, Colton McKivitz holds up pretty well. In fact, I bet Chris Forster and Kyle Shanahan are very happy with his play in 2024, and they're going to be looking for him to build upon what he did in 2024 and have even a better season in 2025. So I do think that the right side of the line could stay the same. Dominic Puni, Colton McKivitz, I think they're both going to be back and starting, and I think the adjustment could be Jake Brendel along the offensive line. Brendel at left guard could be the changes as Aaron Banks moves on. Now let's talk about wide receiver. And, Juwan Jennings just got the new contract last year. Same with Brandon Ayuk. I expect both of them to come back. With Ayuk, it's going to be what is his injury is going to look like. That's going to be the hard part. When will he come back? But they're going to come back. Now, one of the things people have been bringing up with the rework contract of Deebo Samuel, will Deebo Samuel be back in 2025? I think 49er fans are split on this. A lot of people are ready to move on from Deebo Samuel, not happy with the season he had in 2024. And I can't argue that it was a great season. It wasn't. For Deebo standards, it was definitely one that was down and didn't reach expectation. But let's listen to what John Lynch had to say about whether Deebo Samuel will be back in 2025.
Deebo's situation.
Deebo's under contract. Yeah.
You expect him back?
Yeah. A good player and has done a ton for this organization. And, we're not in the business of letting good players out of here. So, yeah.
Pretty straightforward. Deebo's under contract. We're not in the business of letting good players out of here. And so, I think that's a good point is you don't want to move on from good players. And Deebo's been a good player for the 49ers for a long time, so they're not willing to move on from him. So I think it's likely Deebo could come back, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of conversation when the 49ers get close to the draft, whether Deebo Samuel is on the trade block or not. 49ers over the last 2 years have not pulled the trigger on Deebo trades, and so we'll see what happens when they get there. But as of right now, I expect Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have said it. I expect Deebo Samuel to be one of the 49ers wide receivers in 2025 to go along with Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowling. It's been pretty fun to see who they've brought in. So I'm excited about the potential of maybe getting all those guys back together again and seeing what they could do. Now let's flip it over to defense. And with defense, there are more players who are free agents. Aaron Banks, the only offensive free agent for the 49ers that they have to consider of the 12 guys we talked about, because Juwan Jennings being the 12th, there's an opportunity for more change and turnover on defense. Nick Bosa, of course, he's going to be back. No reason to really get into that one too bad. He will be your starting defensive end, and hopefully he will stay healthy and have a really big season. Leonard Floyd, yes, I do expect Leonard Floyd to be back. Leonard Floyd, Yetur Gross-Matos will continue. They had 2-year deals when they signed last season, and hopefully both of them can stay healthy. Floyd battled through, but Yetur kind of got nicked up a little bit, so I expect our defensive ends to stay the same. Now, what about Javon Hargrave? And when he's reworked his deal, it was like Deebo. Everyone's like, oh, Jude 1, he's gone. Well, here's what John Lynch had to say about Javon Hargrave and whether he'll be back in 2025 for the San Francisco 49ers.
John, with the contract reworking for Javon Hargrave, kind of setting up the post-June 1, what have you expressed to him about the plan and what you would expect from him, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, just that, Matt. It was we had some salary cap challenges, and that was something that, allowed for the post-1. You can early designate it. And what I told Javon is he's a player we really like. Same reason we went out and signed him. That hasn't changed. He's an impactful player. We do have some challenges, and so this doesn't mean we can't compete for his services. It allows him, though, rather than waiting until post-June 1 and being SOL because free agency already happened, it gives him an opportunity to go see what his market, and that may include us. So we'll get into our plans. We know Javon, who he is. He's on a good track coming back from his injury, and would we be interested in having him? Of course. Is that something we can come to an agreement on, and is it something that fits in our plans? We will see, and that's the exact conversations I've had with Javon.
I mean, he's going to go test the market. He gets to go right out into free agency in March, and that's what the 49ers are waiting for. He was expected to make $19 million this season, and the 49ers are going to wait for him, go out there, see what he can find out, and then if he comes back and says, hey, I can only get $8 million, are you guys willing to match that or maybe even overtake that by $1 million or whatever it is? And I'm not saying it's going to be 8. I was just giving a number. For instance, it could be 12. It's an opportunity for the 49ers to bring him back, but I do believe it's very unlikely that the 49ers are going to bring back Javon Hargrave. I think this is an opportunity for him to go somewhere else, and I think that it just didn't work out for Hargrave in San Francisco. But you never say never. You don't know if it's going to work out. Maybe there will be low market value and Hargrave could be coming back. But I think this is the first no on defense. I don't think Hargrave will be back in 2025. Now, Malik Collins, who the 49ers traded for last year for the Houston Texans before the season started, he was really great this season. He tied a career high in sacks with 5. And I thought he did a really good job as a penetrator in the interior defensive line. He'll be back, and he'll be starting unless the 49ers are able to massively upgrade defensive tackle, which would mean bring in a couple of guys. And if that is the case, and Malik Collins ends up being a backup, this defensive line will be absolutely savage next season. I really like him. I thought he was great. At linebacker, Fred Warner, absolutely, you're coming back. You don't have a choice. The 4th first-team honor that he's gotten, phenomenal. He's going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer someday. Played on a broken leg pretty much the entire season. And I expect Fred Warner, just like George Kittle, to start discussing contract extension. 49ers could free up some cap space, but also get one of the best players in the history of the league locked up and potentially back in San Francisco for a long time. And his contract might actually help the question mark of the next guy, and that's Dre Greenlaw. Greenlaw, of course, everyone's seen it now. Sidney Warner posted a video that went viral on TikTok of them celebrating with Dre's partner and, saying, hey, this could be a going away thing. And so a lot of people got talking about it. And we know the 49ers would love to keep Dre Greenlaw, but, can you is the other question. Well, here's what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch had to say about Dre.
Greenlaw, we're doing everything in the world we can to bring Greenlaw back. And we're not into losing really good players who are unbelievable people. So we're going to do everything we can to never lose really good players who are good people. But that's also a very hard challenge, very hard. And that's something that you don't just talk about in one meeting. There's too many things that connect to that. Draft, free agency, roster, years, all that stuff. And that takes weeks, months to decide.
And I think the only thing I'd add to that, the communication with the players, what's most important. And I know I sat with Dre and always have great discussions with Dre. I know about his want to be here, and I know our want to have him here. And like Kyle said, there's realities and there's tough decisions and so many factors to all those things. But believe me, the desire on both sides is there.
Desire on both sides is one of the most significant things because then you're willing to work. You're willing to give up $1 million here or there to make something happen as somebody to feel more comfortable. But there's a lot of circumstances that fit into Dre Greenlaw being in San Francisco. If it's a person standpoint, 100% everyone knows we want Dre Greenlaw back. If it's a player, just how he plays on the field, 1,000%, you want him back. He's an attitude for the defense, and he's a game wrecker and a game changer. Just seeing him back for a limited time proved how significant it was. I'm sure the 49ers will be deep into his medical, making sure he's healthy. But I think ultimately this comes down to other contracts not named Dre Greenlaw. 49ers have to make decisions on key players, and one of those is Brock Purdy. And it's going to be hard to ask Brock Purdy to take less money, but him taking less money could ultimately save players on the football team. And that's with all players. You know, you rework George Kittle's contract, he sets it up a certain way, and it helps you bring somebody else back. So there's a lot of decisions to be made as they're building this football team. And there has to be that thought and that balance of, well, we can let this go to get this because this is more important. And that's what the 49ers are trying to figure out. But they're going to be very vigorous in trying to figure out how to have Dre Greenlaw back in San Francisco in 2025. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that, yes, they figure this thing out. I think they make him a priority on defense because this defense is better with him there. I do think they need to spend money at defensive tackle, not the $19 million that you were owed for Javon Hargrave, but maybe you could pay someone $7. So I think there's a thought process. I'm sorry, $12 and save $7 million. There's a process to this, but I think it's going to come down to other contracts that end up determining whether Dre Greenlaw is back. But I'm going to say, yes, Dre Greenlaw comes back to the 49ers. D. Winters, yes, under contract. Don't have to worry about it. He took over for that other guy, number 59. I'm not even going to bring him up since he quit a football game. D. Winters will be back and hopefully taking another step forward as Sam linebacker. And hopefully it's D. Winters, Dre Greenlaw, and Fred Warner. I love that group, especially if somehow we get Robert Saleh, all gas, no brakes. That could be a fun linebacker crew as D. Winters tries to become the next Azeez Al-Shire type player for the 49ers who comes up, steps up, and makes big plays. Not exactly Azeez Al-Shire. Charvarius Ward, no. I don't think Charvarius Ward is going to be back. I love Charvarius Ward. I've talked about this before. He's one of my favorite players on the football team. I love his attitude. I love the way his approach to the game. He always entertained me with everything he did, from his play to his interviews and the things that he said and the way he talks. Everything is great about Charvarius Ward. But I think that, the team is ready to move on. They put their finances towards Deommodore Lenoir. They drafted young with Bernardo Green. And I think they're ready to move in another direction. And for Charvarius Ward, I think it's important for him and his family to move in another direction too. Just listening to his comments after the season, there's some difficult things, and no one ever knows how tough those things are. And I hope he figures it out. And I'll be rooting for Charvarius Ward. I just hope he doesn't go to one of the teams I dislike, because then I'll only be able to root for him. But if he ends up in somewhere like Houston or somewhere like that where I like D'Amico, then yeah, I'll be able to root for him. And he's a really good player, and I like him, but I don't think he will be back. So no Hargrave, no Charvarius Ward in 2025. Deommodore Lenoir, absolutely. They locked him up with a new contract. Bernardo Green, 100%. He's going to be a stud for the 49ers for the next few years, and him and Lenoir are going to be the 49ers staples at corner. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Talanoa Hufanga, and I think Hufanga is going to be another one the 49ers would love to bring back because of the question marks with Jair Brown. But you got to take a look at the market. If some of the early market numbers are correct, and they're saying he's going to make $12 to $15 million on the open market, I think he would be too rich for the 49ers blood, and they would look to go another route with maybe a veteran player that's going to cost a little bit less money. So it's going to come down to pricing. You want Dre Greenlaw, you want Hufanga. I think the 49ers would value Greenlaw over Hufanga, and that's probably how they're going to approach the offseason. So I think they're going to try to figure this thing out. And I think ultimately they'd like to bring back Hufanga, and I think they're going to get motivated enough to figure this thing out. I think Parag is going to figure out some financial genius, and he's going to figure out how to keep Dre and Talanoa Hufanga. So I'm going to say yes, but it's not a firm yes. It's a very soft yes, because I'm just not sure how they figured out financially. I just know they need him. When you look at the roster, Jair is not ready. You have Malik Mustafa, and you got what? And I think that's why Hufanga has to come back. Him and Dre Greenlaw on the field together, and that 49ers defense was elite against the Los Angeles Rams. And so I really would like to have Hufanga back, and I think the 49ers would as well. Malik Mustafa, absolutely long-term starter at safety for the 49ers. And who knows, maybe that's the tandem. I do think the 49ers will address safety in the draft as well. And then, of course, we know Jair Brown is going to come back. I just thought I'd bring him up since he did start a lot of games this season. I thought about bringing up other guys like Jordan Mason and others, but I'm going to save that for another conversation because I think there's some unique things with some of the depth players. Also, I'm going to start a new feature over on Patreon where I actually do the coaches meetings and kind of go through the process of how you would evaluate play and deciding if guys are going to come back. If that's something you're interested in, you can go check that out over on the Patreon. So that is all for this episode. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Please give it a 5-star rating. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.